years ago, maybe as much as 12 to 15 years ago. And Marie Jose was particularly interested in this, and she had or tried to develop contacts in many different Muslim countries, and like something would get started, and then it wouldn't happen, and this went on and on. But ultimately, with you, Chantal, Marie Jose was able to start to develop our MENA community, or communities, I should say, and it's been kind of a dream fulfilled for me, or I should say fulfilling, since it's so much in process. Um, when uh, I I didn't discover brain spotting in 2003. I noticed it. Okay, because it's like, it's what I noticed was out there for people to see, and people who are doing therapies making use of eyes and eye movements and so on. Um, we're seeing different manifestations in different eye positions, and not really, either not paying attention to it, or as they say in EMD, as I was taught in EMDR, if you're going across and a person's eyes stop tracking, they called it a tracking problem, as opposed to, which is to not understand that if the eyes stop tracking, it's because there's something there. Okay. And with the ice skater, when I went across and her eyes started wobbling like that, I stopped immediately. But if I kept going, I'm sure her eyes would not have tracked my finger. So, like I said, I didn't discover brain spotting. I noticed it, and uh, let me just hold on one second. Um, then my question was, is this really something that will work for everybody, or is it just something with the ice skater with a few people? And in trying out, looking for the anomalies, or not just eye wobbles, but blinks and all kinds of things, first in the eyes and then in the face. I saw that this works for everybody. It's not just very specific to certain people or conditions. Um, After doing this after having all the success, not just with myself, but other colleagues of mine and clients of mine who were therapists who I shared it with, I decided after a year that I wanted to do a training, put together a training. Okay. But when I made that decision, I was very clear within my own mind that brain spotting is not a New York phenomenon because I'm from New York. It's not a US phenomenon because I'm from the United States. It's an international phenomenon, even before I had given any trainings in it. And that the way I wanted to develop the model as taught in the trainings was for it to fit in every country and every culture. And because I saw that most of the models that came out of the United States, they weren't even aware, were just very US centric, so to speak. But the idea was, instead of everybody having to um, work with a Western model, I wanted it to be a global or an international model. This was again back in 2004. We're talking about 21 years ago. Um, and the first five trainings I did, three were in the United States, one was in Argentina, and one was in Germany. So brain spotting became international right away. And I had friends and colleagues in uh, many countries and communities around the world. So I was able to bring brain spotting in to these countries and cultures. So um, it's the same spirit now in 2025 that we're gathering here together, and uh, and the I'm not just here to talk about brain spotting, and I'm here really to answer questions, which is the best way for me that I like to teach, that I think I teach effectively. Um, but also how um, how brain spotting fits in with the cultures of the Middle East and North Africa. Um, one of the things that I'm really proud about is that brain spotting has been connected in with indigenous healing wisdoms all around the world. One particular community where we have that is the Philippines, and they do this very autonomously, where they've integrated brain spotting into Filipino indigenous healing wisdom and practice. Um, our trainer from Latin America is also trained in Andean medicine, so uh, it's going on outright there. Our leader and organizer in South Korea is also trained in Korean medicine. So so that's one of the most important things that I want to take away from everybody today, which is how to uh, uh, how to integrate brain spotting into the cultures of the Middle East and North Africa. I want to just bring that back to you, Chantal, for your thoughts on that. Uh, just some initial thoughts.
Also sitting on the seat edge of my seat in excitement for you to open up about the neuroexperiential model with the eight nervous systems that I heard you speak on at the masterclass for the Netherlands, because that was
Okay,
incredible.
I'll go right to that, but again,
Yeah.
I want you to help this webinar
Yes.
to address what about brain spotting holds or can be integrated into the Muslim cultures, the Arab cultures. Um,
Yes, I find that brain spotting is incredibly integrative because it's something that comes from us organically and intuitively, which you're going to find in all of our cultures universally. Where I find it meets my culture so beautifully and this region as well is culturally, it can be very difficult to talk about big problems. There can be a sense of we don't talk about things. If you talk about it, it makes it worse. You don't put your focus there. So brain spotting can bridge that barrier of speech. Of going,
mhm.
okay, we don't need to particularly talk about something, but we can sit with this together and we can then go into the eye position, etc. But it's navigating that barrier where it fits in quite beautifully with not needing to talk and just sitting in silence together. And then if they want to talk, they can, etc.
Well, what's interesting is when a person recognizes they don't have to talk, eventually they start to talk,
Yes.
but it's in their own time and in their own way. And and when they talk, they don't have to continue talking. Okay. Um, look, I'm going to give a quick overview of the neuroexperiential model, and then I really would like to field questions and comments.
But also in terms of culture as well, David, another element where it's so beautiful is relationally. We heal in tribes, in community, in group,
Mhm.
not by going to a doctor. It's by sitting around drinking coffee with each other. It's by all the ladies rolling vine leaves together. We heal through community. We heal in group. We heal with one another. So this is where
Well,
the it's so applicable.
well,
It's so
in brain
relational.
spotting, we talk about two people being together in a healing space as the power of two. Okay. And when we talk about many people, together, it's the power of the many. Uh, as far as communal healing goes, one thing I noticed decades ago, and I still see it all the time, is when I do a demonstration during a training, that people seem to heal more quickly, more deeply, more powerfully in the trainings than they do in my own office, whether it's my virtual office or in my own personal office. And I realized it was the healing power of the group, that supported it. So um, bringing this back to the neuroexperiential model, I'll call it the NEM. Um, uh, it recognizes that psychotherapeutic healing has been very much westernized. Okay, like and Western science has existed for just a few hundred years, when indigenous healing has existed for thousands of years, and that there's a real lack of awareness and a lack of respect for the healing wisdom and practices from around that have been going on around the world. And the Western idea is very much in the Western philosophy is very much an individualistic philosophy. You know, it happens if you make it happen as an individual, you know, out of context of relationship, out of context of family, out of context of community. Um, and and that it can be studied. It not only can, it must be studied in a Western way. That's the evidence-based model, which no other place but in the West could ideas like that ever even be considered, let alone be implemented. But the evidence-based model says if you haven't proven the healing that you're doing, okay, through hypothesis, single variable hypothesis testing research, then it has no value or it doesn't even exist. Okay, which is a very cynical viewpoint, in my opinion, a very disrespectful viewpoint, in my opinion, um, and aggressive. And aggression has no place in healing. You know, welcoming is the foundation of healing. The other thing is the what I call the diagnosis model or models based on DSM-5 and ICD-10, which classifies um, um, disorders based on symptom clusters. Okay, and I try not to make it look like I'm putting down or rejecting these ideas because a lot of very smart people with good intentions have worked for years and decades to develop all of this. And there is value to it, but but in a limited way. Okay. The biggest problem with the two biggest problems with the diagnosis models is that they are not developmental. They look top down at the human system in terms of symptom clusters. Like if you have 6 or 8 of these symptoms, then you can be diagnosed as having a panic disorder or a depressive disorder or a personality disorder or, all of these things without the slightest interest or awareness of, well, what is this and where does it come from? We believe in the NEM that everything that is called a diagnosis, based on symptoms, is first of all based on manifestations, and second of all, has a developmental component to it that entails both traumatic developmental trauma, but also developmental resilience and the interweaving of the two. And we also believe that something that comes from developmental trauma is not and cannot be a disorder. Okay, if somebody is unfortunately attacked in the street and is beaten, we don't call it a beaten in the street disorder. Okay, we say that the person is a victim of assault. And from a developmental point of view, if someone experienced significant to profound attachment trauma, attachment chaos, which is the foundation for all manifestations that come beyond that, um, uh, then then that needs to be understood and recognized, and to see not the symptoms of it, but the manifestations of it. And all traumatic experiences that go from the first few days, weeks, months of life, the first few years of life, and then on into childhood and adolescence and adulthood, um, are marked by the traumatic experiences, the accumulation of the traumatic experiences, the neuro networks that develop around all these developmental traumas, as well as the person's capacity for healing, resilience, and adaptation. To look at it from the most significant point of view, maybe the most extreme point of view, what is called uh, DID, dissociative identity disorder, that we call dissociative identity adaptation, DIA. Okay. Not only is a marker of profound developmental trauma that usually includes abuse, it is also it also reflects the person's capacity for excuse me, for survival and adaptation and resilience. The fact that the human nervous system is able to develop dissociative capsules that are also we call parts is an amazing feat of adaptation and survival. You know, so even when we look at what are called the uh, diagnoses and the disorders, we see the capacity for resilience in them at the same time. And when we engage the person from a healing point of view, when we hold the space, hold the frame with them, and we hold the frame around um, not just what the wounding and the suffering is, but also in the survival and the adaptation. When we hold the space, being mindful of that, the client experiences something completely different than when we're sitting with them as if they are a pathological diagnosis. You know? And for us on the inside, we have a totally different sense of the person. Instead of being taken into what would be called their pathology, okay, we're connecting with their not just their capacity for survival and adaptation. We're connecting with their essential humanness, which is pretty much the foundation of the NEM and how we receive people and how we sit with them. Just from here, I mean, I have more things to say about the NEM. Do you or anybody else have any questions or comments right now?
Thank you for that, David. I'd love to open the floor to any of our graduates if they would like to share anything on what David said, if that's resonated with any of you. Seeing who's brave. That's
Dr.
okay.
David.
Oh, yes, Victoria. Yes.
If you remember me, I met you in 2003 in New York at the conference.
Yes, I remember you.
Yes,
great-
and I told
great
you I'm
seeing you
from you.
again.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And since then, you were in my mind. I was like, well, I wish if I have been in contact with you then. And I think it just, I got busy in Dubai with my daughter and practice, went to different, settings. But however, I remember at that moment when you were doing brain spotting with one of the page, when it was about the like audience, how it changed, their perspective, how did they feel. And I remember I thought how can this stick, like make a difference? And I do remember that. And so 4 months ago, or a year ago, I went to this, webinar, resilience table, and I saw Chantel, and she was, introducing the model to MENA people. I just wanted to join. So I just want to, say I'm very happy to be here with you and learn again from you. And that's what I want to say. So this is amazing.
And
Thank
Dr.
you.
Faria is phase 2 trained now and doing continual supervision to go towards
So,
certification.
so can you just tell me briefly what it's like for you to be doing brain spotting?
I think what you have been talking about it. So when I did brain spotting, I know sometimes it takes a while to feel brave to do this. And considering the population right now I'm working is with addiction, with the relapse and multiple trauma. And also a lot of them, with very, limited, I'll say ability to adapt as well as to understand the language. It has been a bit challenging, but I can see sometimes with different, when somebody is able to understand more from language perspective, I think that's my struggle. because, a lot of them, they're coming, like, because we do it in English. I'm mostly used to do it in English. And the majority are Arabic speaking. So I kind of searching for English speaking person, but I have done with some of the people who speak Arabic. It has been a bit challenge, but I won't give up. So that's why I'm going to be taking with Chantel an individual, supervision as well. I've talked to the people at work to support me with that. So in order to expand doing that, but I will say, I do see at the beginning when the first time I use it, it's like, no, I want to do AMDR. The patient came with with the understanding. I have heard about AMDR, and I had training AMDR as well. And it's like, no, I just feel comfortable with brain spotting. I just introduced it to him, and he read about it, and he said, I want to go with this. And once we went, he said, can you give me the stick? Take it home. Can I do this at home? I said, no, 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 wait. And it was challenging, but I've done multiple times with him. And again, I'm trying to work with more population. So,
Okay. Let me, in terms of, you mentioned being brave. Okay. I want to reconceptualize the idea of being brave as far as bringing brain spotting to new clients or clients you've done EMDR who want EMDR. I want you and everybody to think of yourself as a medical doctor. Okay. And that your area of expertise are diseases like pneumonia, malaria, and so on. And you've been using a certain medicine with pretty good effect. Okay. Um, uh, let's say a 60 to 70% cure rate, but there's still 30 to 40% of the population that doesn't respond that well or at all to this. A new medication comes out, okay, that has a 95% cure rate, okay, instead of 60 to 70, 95% cure rate. And it's been tested and researched and so on. And you use it with a client and their pneumonia clears up quickly and completely and so on. When you go to your other patients, clients, okay, would you think to yourself, well, how am I going to convince them to use this new medicine? Or would you, if a client says, no, I don't want to use this new medicine, I want to continue on the old medicine, would a medical doctor ever not give something that is the most effective, excuse me, medicine that they know? They would never even think about it. Would they allow the client, the patient, to say, no, I want the less effective medicine instead of this new, more effective medicine? The medical doctor goes in with a sense of confidence and enthusiasm and certainty. We don't use certainty too much in brain spotting, but certainty. Um, and the patient, the client, feels that. It's the same way with brain spotting. Okay. You say, how do I introduce brain spotting to a new client or to a client who I've been doing other things with? Remember one thing and one thing alone. Clients come to us for healing, for the best possible healing that they can get. Okay. And if we have a sense of clarity and confidence that brain spotting can give them the best healing, they will feel it and they will almost never doubt it or question it. I was trained a long time ago in EMDR. I've been trained in somatic experiencing, trained in psychodynamic psychotherapy and other things. Okay. And I can use whatever I think will help the client the most. But when I go in with a client, the idea that I am going to allow them to get any less healing than, that I will accept them getting less healing than they can possibly get is an impossibility to me. I would never let a client who's coming for the best healing they can get anything less than the best. So it's our attitude, our confidence, our enthusiasm, and our clarity. When that comes across, clients are drawn in by that. And this is what clients are looking for. Your thoughts on what I've just been saying?
Definitely. Oh, you want me to speak to Fikriya? Fikriya, yes.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to add, and Chantel, thank you, David. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's loud in my area, so I hope you can hear me. Fine.
I hear you perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We were just talking about this at our supervision meeting in terms of, how is it that we encompass brain spotting? Is it one of the tools that we use, or because I was finding it hard to integrate it into kind of the different techniques, if you will. But what you said makes perfect sense, because I've been finding it's like I want to use it, and my clients already have, they have the brain spotting soundtracks. They have everything in order. But why is it that I then don't introduce it? Because I believe in it, because I've seen the healing. And so we talked about in our supervision session that that we have to have the equipment next to us, rather than in my bag where I have to get up and go and, take it out. And so that's what I've started doing, having it right there next to me so that it comes organically, right when, what would you like to work on? And then you put up the pointer immediately. So anyway, so thank you for saying that. I think it's spot on. So I do appreciate you saying that it's, of course, we would use the medicine and the techniques that we find most effective. And so if we believe in this, then absolutely, then we should use it. So thank you.
You're most welcome. But I want to add this in. Brain spotting is based on the uncertainty principle. And the uncertainty principle is based on the fact that there are 1 to 4 quadrillion synaptic connections in the human nervous system. A quadrillion is 1 billion multiplied by 1 million. Okay, that is essentially infinite and unknowable. So the uncertainty principle, based on this neurobiology, says to us that when the client comes to us, that we can't possibly know who they are, where they've been, where they're coming from. We can't know where they are. And as they start to go into processing mode, we can't know what that processing is, and we definitely can't know where it's going. That's the uncertainty principle, the foundation of brain spotting. Before you ever take out the pointer or look for gaze spots, okay, that's the way that we receive people and the way we sit with people. If you look at other models, there are subtle versions of certainty that are based on the idea that you can know what you can't possibly know. And there are some not so subtle, aspects of certainty in different models. Okay. So if you are able to clear your mind and recognize that the only information you can possibly get about the client is what they bring across to us as they bring it across, you'll start to recognize, hey, this part of model A or this part of model B is based on the fact that you can know and should know, and that your interactions with the clients are based on what you can and should know. If you really recognize uncertainty, which is, there's even a spiritual aspect to it, but it's based on brain science, on the nervous system. You'll start to realize that there are things that you just can't do, and you start to let them go. The next aspect is that, which is another important part of the NEM, is the way we conceptualize the frame, which is that the client brings to the first session and to every subsequent session their own neuroexperiential frame, which is defined as what causes them to decide to come to us in the first place, which is suffering or inhibition, inability to feel the way they want to feel, to be able to think the way they want to think, to be able to act the way they want to act, and that we mindfully receive that frame from the client in that first session and every subsequent session, and we hold that frame with them, and we shape that frame with them. In brain spotting, we call it the dual attunement frame, and the foundation of this dual attunement frame is the relational frame, So brain spotting is a relational therapy as well, a relational therapy. But the second part of the dual attunement frame that is on top of that is the neurobiological frame, which takes into account activation, where the activation is held in the body, and the relevant eye positions that go along with it that give us access to that activation in the body. So we have the relational frame as the foundation and the neurobiological frame, which is on top of that. And from that, those frames that we're holding with the client, the processing that happens from there, okay, happens, it has a focus and a trajectory to it that it wouldn't have without this frame that we're receiving and holding and shaping with them. Okay. And that's where the client is the head of the comet and we are in the tail of the comet. Okay. And the concept of the tail of the comet is that it's always following the head of the client, the head of the comet. In other words, that we follow the client wherever they go in everything, but particularly in their processing. And that as we do this, we don't know where the head of the comet is going. We don't know how and why it's going there, but we know that that is the client's healing trajectory. And we follow that wherever it goes. If your model teaches you that you have to take an extensive history before you even start any sort of healing process, then that this history may take one session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions. It doesn't recognize that you are communicating with the client's neocortex, their thinking human brain, for information that is put in language that cannot recognize or express their early development. And it doesn't recognize things that are held in the body. And it doesn't recognize and express things that are dissociated because of developmental trauma. And if your model says that once you take this history, that then you form the diagnosis, and the diagnosis is not developmental, and it's based on pathologizing the human response to developmental trauma. Okay, that there is a lot of certainty in that. There's the certainty in the history taking and the belief that this will give you all the information that you need. And there's certainty in the diagnosis. And what does the diagnosis lead to? It leads to treatment planning. Now, the uncertainty principle says you can't plan the treatment because you can't know in advance where it's going to go. That's why we go into the tail of the comet. And from the treatment, the treatment planning or the treatment goals, well, how do you know in advance, what the goals really need to be when you don't really know what's so deep in this complex system? And then from those treatment goals follow the interventions. Okay. And most of those interventions are trying to be in the head of the comet or even ahead of the head of the comet. Okay. Which is not how neurobiology works. Models that have protocols and procedures, the human nervous system, and I'm going to say nervous systems, I'll be talking about that in a while, do not go according to protocols and procedures. They go according to their own deep intuitive understanding of how to survive and how to adapt. And you cannot intervene with them from the outside. You can only receive them, from the outside. So, swinging this all the way around, before you ever pick up a pointer, or before you even point out a gay spot, if you are working from the uncertainty principle and the frame principle that we say in the face of uncertainty, all we have is the frame, you're doing brain spotting. Okay. And if you're not working from uncertainty, and if you're not working from that mindful awareness of receiving and holding the frame with the client, then you're not doing brain spotting either. I've just been, and this is all neuroexperiential model. Do you have an, any thoughts about what I've been saying?
I think we have a question from Luna, or her hand up. Yes.
Okay, great.
And I'll just, before I introduce Luna, that was Belkis. Thank you. She's phase 2 and working towards certification. And Luna is also phase 2 working towards certification.
Great.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Dr. Grand. It's nice to be with you today.
Nice to be with you.
I don't have a question. I actually wanted to comment on one of your requests from the beginning, which is how you wanted to know how brain spotting fits in MENA culture, Middle East, North African culture, and what can we hold within the Arab or Muslim culture. And I just wanted to share with you what one of my male Arab Muslim clients had shared with me after we had done brain spotting. And this was a case that was quite serious, and the results of it, the healing was profound and evident, because this was a person that was getting severe cluster headaches daily for like months and did the whole medical route, and then somehow luckily landed with me, and I had just been trained. So I'm like, let's do it. But the thing he said, and he's very resistant to anything not scientific. All right. But we had built really good therapeutic alliance, and he trusted me, like to the point that when I recommended he see an osteopath, he's like, "Ugh," you know. So I later asked him, I'm like, you wouldn't see a chiropractor or an osteopath, but you agreed to brain spotting. He's like, that's because I trust you. So thankfully he trusted me, we did it. But in the end, he said something really nice. And this is the culture bit, or the Muslim bit, let's just say, like the how we can tie it to the Arab world. And he's like, our Prophet Muhammad used to go up into the mountain and do something called i'tikaf, where he would sit for days upon days, and he would just look out from the mountain and think about all the difficult things that were happening in his life. He was trying to, spread Islam. He was hated. Everybody wanted to fight him. And he's like, that really just like crossed my mind, because all we're doing here is sitting, and we're doing ta'ammul. Ta'ammul in English, if you were to translate it, it's mindfulness. But in Arabic, it has slightly different meaning, which is like you're actually looking at something with hope, and just like losing your focus to like an eye spot, basically. And he made that connection for me. And he's quite I don't want to say he's really like, he's just typical Arab Muslim man. And I loved that connection that he made. So just thought it would be a nice Arabic anecdote you'd like to hear about.
Yeah, thank you. And again, like I said, I didn't discover it. It's
Yeah,
been around for thousands of years, and this you're going right there. And what you're talking about also, what he recognized, we call processing or focused mindfulness processing. It sounds like the exact same thing of what he was talking about and what you're talking about now.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about the 8 different nervous systems. Okay.
Should we take the one more question, David?
Oh,
We
yeah,
have
yes.
from Saren. I haven't met you before, Saren. Lovely to meet you, but she's a practitioner joining us from Jordan.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Yes, finally we get to see each other, Chantal. Hi. I wanted to add, and it's a very nice experience meeting you, Mr. David, about my experience with my Arabic-speaking clients and client base in the Middle East, especially Jordan, UAE, Kuwait, and any Arabic-speaking client base I have in Europe and UK a lot. Explaining to them, different mediums like EMDR, and I do via brain spotting, and explain this and how they were found. I find them very eager to try something new, because a lot of the Arabic speaking techniques are very on the CBT level, and people are now aware that, trauma, because it became a very big trend at some point. they're like, oh, I want to deal with the trauma. Is there a tool I can deal with this thing? And I found brain spotting after having two clients who got stuck on that point while doing EMDR. And we just stayed there. And then I had started researching, and then that's how I learned where brain spotting comes from. And that was actually a neurological reaction. And I started taking the trainings. What enlightened me more was doing also the session with Onno van der Hart at the long training on DID that Mary Jose had coordinated for. And I just find that clients in the Arabic region are very open and eager to try new things. And the way when explaining brain spotting is literally melting down that barrier. And I want to go back to what just Luna said, that when you reference meditation and the power of silence in the Islamic quotes, it really makes them more eager to try it rather than exposing themselves and having to go through, because a lot of the things are happening a little bit on the lower side and are not being discussed. So when you mix experiences and religion and the scientific background between how it is, how it affects your body, being able to give enough neuro psychoeducation on how what's going on in your body, how you're feeling, I've seen more people eager coming asking for brain spotting, especially that the community of Arabic speaking brain spotters is smaller than compared to other languages. Um, that's how I found Chantel online, by someone referencing her. Um, but I think it all goes back to the trust relationship between the clients and trying new techniques, because there's also that misconception. I was like, oh, so what's going to happen to me? Let me research it and come back to you in the next session. But I'm seeing a lot of beautiful work with sexual abuse survivors, with conflict survivors on dealing with their neurological reactions when it comes to the traumas they've been living through. And them themselves are the ambassadors for brain spotting. I just feel it's the other way around. It's not us the tools, but it's actually them feeling the difference. And then, oh, my friend wants to come just for brain spotting. And that's how it's rolling out for me as an Arabic speaking brain spotter, to be honest. On a different level, I do have a question. I would like to hear more on your take on brain spotting with clients who have neurosis um, as a diagnosis. I am, it's going well, but I would like to hear your take on it.
When you say neurosis, I mean, that sounds like old school psychoanalytic, if I'm understanding you
Yes.
correctly. Um,
Yes.
I'll tell you something. I was trained originally psychoanalytically, so
Okay.
it's language and concept that I'm very familiar with. Um, I'll say, of course, there was neurosis and psychosis.
Hmm.
Those were the two main categories early in psychoanalysis, and then really it started in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. They started to talk about borderline. Okay, borderline personality disorder. It's just not. Again, I don't believe in disorders. Um, but do you know this is? It's not a test, but I'm saying it sort of hypothetically. How they came up with the term and the concept
Yes.
borderline?
As I said, when it comes to a lot of things that have to do with mental health, like also psychiatric evaluation, there is a little bit of being on the backside of it, not being able to keep up with a lot of the testing tools, the new diagnostic tools. So I do have a couple of clients who are like, we're diagnosed with neurosis and we want to do brain spotting, which is
Okay.
fine. I'll do it. I'm brave enough to go, head first into this. But I do ask, like, how did you come to this conclusion? And they tell me about their therapeutic process of years and of being medicated, continuous diagnosis. And once one doctor says it's neurosis or psychosis, it just continues. Nobody
Right.
inhales
Right.
it, nobody moves forward. And I will not,
Right. Well, I'm going to finish what I'm saying about borderline, then I'm going to go right to your question and comment. Um, uh, it used to be, they used to talk about three categories for human beings: normal, neurotic, or psychotic. But then they realized that in between neurotic and psychotic, there's a whole category of people who they're too sick to be neurotic, and they're not sick enough to be psychotic. Okay. So they were on the borderline between neurotic and psychotic. That's why it became called borderline. Okay. There's like an odd term, but that's the history to it. So once they came up with borderline, instead of it being normal, neurotic, or psychotic, it was normal. They called it normal neurotic, borderline, and psychotic. Like there was nobody who didn't have any neuroses, which was sort of acknowledging that we all get traumatized developmentally. But coming back to what you're saying, first of all, any client who comes to me and says, "This is my diagnosis," I don't accept it, I don't reject it. Okay. I'm openly curious about it. Okay. But if a client comes to me who has been in therapy for a long time with many different therapists, and they've been on many different medications, okay, as a developmentalist, I have learned from experience that there's more early attachment trauma, excuse me, and more early and worse developmental trauma. Okay. And that the person usually has much more of a dissociative network that has ever been recognized or correctly diagnosed by the previous therapists or medicating psychiatrists or anything like this. Okay. And and so the reason why they never got better from all the different therapists and therapies and all the different medications is because this early developmental trauma network with a strong attachment trauma component to it was never recognized. It was never explored. If they took a history, they never had access to it because the neocortex goes by language and thought and doesn't recognize, the wisdom of the body and the fact that the body carries the history. Um, and what will oftentimes happen is that when you do brain spotting with these people, sooner or later, and oftentimes it's sooner, a lot of things are going to start to come up, and the person can start to become destabilized. You know, but they're not becoming destabilized because of brain spotting. It's this destabilization is being located with the brain spotting. And so sometimes it looks like the client is getting worse because they're getting more activated and more destabilized. But in essence, it's like someone's been carrying a disease that's never been recognized. And when the doctor uh, discovers this disease with the person, sometimes the symptoms get worse before the person can start to go into a healing process. So um, so what when you talk about neurosis, um, what my experience is, and I'm still a therapist, a brain spotting therapist. I have my practice every week. So I'm not talking about what I used to do. I'm talking about what I have done and what I'm still doing and continue to do. Um, uh, that Again, clients who have been unresponsive to treatment, it's usually that, not that they're unresponsive, it's that their early developmental traumas were not recognized at all. If you if you have a psychopharmacologist or a psychiatrist who does medication, they never look for this kind of stuff. You know, they look for the symptoms and they look for the medications that address the particular symptoms. Um, they don't they don't have the concept of developmental trauma. And most therapists still don't. Even if they're trauma informed, they're not informed in terms of the highly dissociated clients who come across as um who usually don't show it directly until you get into the processing. So I've given a long roundabout answer to your question. What do you think about what I've been saying?
No, it totally goes also in line with how I see the whole setup, and how, yes, it's beautiful. You're going through the treatment, and usually by the second session, where I do find that little glitch where the developmental or early um, developmental things start happening, and that's where they also feel the shift. And the way I respond is, okay, you can continue with your psychiatrist and their medication, and if you want, we can work on this component together, and we see how it goes. And this is where they get attached to, okay, this is where I do want to do brain spotting, because nobody ever told me that this is something I can deal with. And everybody's
Mhm.
just focusing on pumping in the medications or considering doing ECT. And both clients are those who don't want to go through that process and have researched brain spotting and reached out for trying it for the last time. Like I said, light in the end of the tunnel. If this works, it works. If this doesn't work, nothing's going to work, kind of mindset.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
do agree that I've also realized that the symptoms they talk about is very close to things that they have lived in their developmental age. That was very it was a turning point for them.
mhm.
And that's the way we're gonna planning to continue. And also, I also learn by going through it. As I said, I dive and I try and I learn, and yeah, that's it. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, clients who are medicated who don't need to be, or even more so, clients who are over medicated,
Mhm.
especially with many different medications. Over medication is highly traumatic to the human nervous system. Okay. So the trauma is not just the developmental trauma, it's the trauma of all the chemicals that are in there affecting their brain chemistry and their body chemistry. Um, and it's almost like an assault on, the medication is almost like an assault on the system. So I'm right there with you on that. I never tell a person that they should go off medication. I'm not a psychiatrist or
Exactly.
physician. Um, but sometimes as the therapy goes on, clients will need the medication less.
I do ask them after certain situations where they start feeling the difference in their day to day and their whole wellness, not just their mental health, to go back to their psychiatrist, tell them about the changes. I do also urge them to talk to their doctors about them going through brain spotting with, a detailed program. And I'm seeing a lot of progress, because the more they feel the difference, the more eager they are to go for their reevaluation and reconsideration of medication. I do have a DID client last year who her psychiatrist, once she started brain spotting, asked to see her every 2 months for reevaluation. Now she's off her medication, and
Wow.
and she's really in a very stable. She knows when to regulate what's happening. How's her self-awareness is so strong that I feel very successful when I could talk about this client, because her parents reached out at a point where, like, we don't know what to do. And this is also, people do come culturally to new things if they feel this is the last thing they can try. This
Hmm.
is a very cultural outlook on new techniques in therapy or medicine. Like, this is the last thing we can try, and then we don't know what to do.
Hmm. Well, in terms of the cultural piece, um, one of the phenomena that happens in cultures is that the more brain spotting is used and the more it's acculturated into the culture, the more it sort of becomes, it's not this thing that came from this guy in New York in the United States. It's almost like this is part of our culture, you know? And it sounds like it's like beginning to happen in the, you know, MENA countries and communities, um, where the more acculturated it gets, the more it's just felt to be, well, this is ours. And that's the goal that I had and have in bringing brain spotting to all around the world, and here particularly to MENA, is for the more that the Arab and Islamic cultures and practices are infused into brain spotting. Okay. And brain spotting not only welcomes them, brain spotting seeks them out. The more it's like, this is ours, you know? And it's the idea, it comes from the United States or from me, or it like it goes away, which is one of the goals that I have in having brain spotting go around the world.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It was very enlightening and very nice to also see that, you know, we are on the same page. But again, culturally, the component is there. Brain spotting is being rolled out, and again, it's the people's experience that's being the ambassador in my outlook on how it's being spread out.
That's the only thing that counts. It's not mine. It's not yours. It's the clients. It's their healing needs and their healing opportunities. So thank you. Chantal, any other hands up? Any other questions or comments?
No, we are good to dive in.
Okay. When people start to their journey on becoming brainwise, and here I'm talking about therapists, but then it goes to the people who come to us. First of all, models like the more cognitive models, the brainwise aspect puts overemphasis on the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex. You know, and the cognitive idea that what we think, if you change what you think, you can change what you feel and change what you feel in your body. Okay, is overemphasizes the power of the neocortex, because for the most part, information travels from the deepest parts of us and comes towards consciousness, and then ultimately ends up at the neocortex that is observes this, and a wise healing neocortex then can give information to the subcortex that has value, but it's only like 10% of the information comes down from the neocortex. Almost 90% of it comes up from the subcortex and from the deepest parts of our body. But even as you go on your journey and becoming brainwise, you start to learn about certain regions or structures in the brain. The amygdala is like a big one, because that's where, you know, the traumatic activation, you know, happens. And the hippocampus we learn about, you know. By the way, the amygdala in Latin means almond, because it's like a small almond. The hippocampus in Latin is the seahorse, because the shape of it is seen as being like similar to the seahorse. And then we learn about the brainstem, and we might learn from there about other regions of the brain, you know, the thalamus and the hypothalamus and all this. But we don't learn about the rest of the nervous system. Okay. Why is the rest of the nervous system just as important as the brain itself and the brain structures? Because it's made up of neurons. Okay. Neurons are these strange little cells that are different than the rest of the cells in the body. Okay. What makes neurons different? Neurons communicate with each other. Okay. That's why we say the nervous system is this vast network of neural pathways and fibers that are all set, sending the electrical impulses down, which is a very complex form of communication. If you break it down to two neurons communicating with each other, you have the neuron itself, and then you have the branch or the branches that reach out from there, called the axons and the dendrites. And then you have the other neuron that has the axons and the dendrites that reach out. And as they reach out, there's that little gap in between, okay, called the synapse, which you've probably heard of. The synapse, and why do we have this gap in between the two branches that reach out from the neurons or the nerve cells? Is because the electrical impulse comes out of the neuron, comes to the end, and it jumps across that gap. And then that electrical impulse goes down to the other neuron. Okay. This is the form of communication that goes on from neuron to neuron. Okay. And every time, the first time that impulse jumps across the synapse, there's a resistance there. Okay. After that first jump has happened, there's less resistance, and the electrical impulse flows more directly from this. And after it's happened 100 times or 1,000 times, it just naturally flows, and the electrical impulses just flow in this direction. When we talk about neuroplasticity, changing in the brain, in the nervous system, it happens because not just one, not just hundreds, but thousands and thousands of neurons are experiencing this jumping across of thousands of synapses over and over and over again. And the information will then naturally flow down there. The communication runs in that way. Okay. So in the other tissue, there is no capacity for communication like that. If there's any other communication that goes on, it's completely different, and we don't really know or understand it. Okay. So I'm fascinated by how neurons are distributed throughout the entire body. Okay. To the degree that we have not just one nervous system, not just two nervous systems, but 8 different nervous systems that all have different functions, but they're all made up of the same components, neurons, and neurons that communicate across synapses. Okay, so the main nervous systems that we know about are the autonomic nervous system and the central nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is more the brain and into the brainstem. The central nervous system is more the spine coming up into the brainstem. Okay, and again, this is like nerve central. This is the center of the nervous systems. Okay, but there are 6 other nervous systems that are distributed in the body. The next one you've probably heard about is the peripheral nervous system. Those are all the nerves that go out. When I say nerves and nerve fibers, it's the neural pathways. They go out from the spine around the rest of the body, all the way out to our hands and our fingertips and the bottom of our feet and our toes. Okay, but these are the nerves that branch out all throughout our body. If you rub your fingertips together, it's the peripheral neurons that are feeling this and are communicating it through the peripheral nerves that go all the way up to the spine and up to the brain. But the peripheral nervous system is made up of neurons. The same neurons that are in the neocortex are in the peripheral nervous system. They're just organized differently, and they have evolved with different purposes. Okay, but our neuronal experience is as much in the peripheral nervous system as it is in the autonomic nervous system. Who we are neuronally is as much peripheral as it is autonomic. Now, also, interestingly enough, these peripheral nerves, they actually go into our skeletal system, into our bones. They go into the connective tissue and the fascia system. So they are, and they go into all the vital organs. So this peripheral nervous system is a crucial aspect of who we are and what we experience. See, what I'm saying with this is that our nervous experience doesn't stop at the brain and the spine. Now we also have the enteric nervous system, also known as the gut brain or the second brain. And in the digestive system, there are 1 billion neurons. 1 billion. That's an incredible number. The spine itself has 1 billion neurons. And we know how central, the spine is to our nervous system. The gut has as many neurons, okay? And they have a very specific purpose, okay? And they're very primitive, but they're made up of brain cells, neurons. It's to pick up toxins that are digested and immediately pick them up, identify them, and immediately expel them from the digestive system, either up through regurgitation or down, expelling them down, through diarrhea. And it really depends on how deep the toxin has gotten into the digestive system. But these enteric neurons pick up and communicate about the toxins before the autonomic nervous system does. As lightning fast as the autonomic nervous system is, the enteric nervous system is that much faster when it comes into toxins that are ingested. Now, we know when we ask our clients, where do you feel the activation in your body? Oftentimes it's some place along the digestive system. Excuse me. I feel it in my stomach. I feel it in my throat, where the esophagus is. Even when they say I feel it in my heart, sometimes it's really part of the digestive system. So our clients are experiencing in those enteric neurons, those digestive neurons, that's where experience and where trauma can also be held. Remember, we talk about trauma overwhelming the nervous system, and I would say nervous systems, and trauma being unprocessed experience that is held. Well, the NEM postulates that any place that there are neurons is a place where unprocessed trauma can be held. And we know that people who have digestive issues, we look at, and they oftentimes have developmental trauma, that it may be these enteric neurons that are holding the unprocessed trauma. By the way, all of this goes back to brain spotting, which is the eye positions, whether it's gaze spotting or outside window or inside window, are believed to be, our theory is that it gets access to the entire nervous system or nervous systems. Then we have the cardiac nervous system. The cardiac nervous system has at least 100,000 neurons. That's a very small amount compared to the 1 billion in the enteric, digestive nervous system. But those are very important neurons. Okay. Those, and again, when we ask a client is activated around a trauma and it's 8, and we say, where do you feel in your body? I feel it in my heart. Okay. We usually think of that metaphorically. Oh, they're heartbroken because of the trauma, the loss, whatever it is. But the NEM says we should think about it neurobiologically first. Okay. And that those neurons have a knowing to them. Okay. That non-neuronal tissue does not. Now it's interesting. The heart is also highly electromagnetic. The electromagnetic field of the heart goes out at least 6 feet. So when two people are within 6 feet of each other, they're the electric field, the electromagnetic field of both people's hearts are actually feeling themselves. Now you say, well, if you work virtually, how does this happen? I think that virtual, our nervous system simulates, just like everybody is listening to me talk right now, like I'm right here in the same room with you. We're in the same virtual room, but in the same room. Our nervous system simulates, presence. That's how you can do therapy and brain spotting virtually. But remember, in our heart, there are neurons that are communicating with each other, that are communicating, with the rest of the nervous systems. The brain, by the way, has, for all its vastness and complexity, has less electromagnetic field than the heart does. Okay, for those of you who have studied heart math or are into heart rate variability, you have your own additional knowledge of this. Now, so we've covered 5 nervous systems. The 6th nervous system is the ocular nervous system. Who would think that the eyes have their own nervous system? Well, the retina, okay, the place where the rods and the cones are, where the information is translated from the visual information that goes into the eyes, and it's translated into electrical impulses. The retinas are made up entirely of neurons. Okay, the retinas are made up of brain cells. And then the optic nerve that carries this information back into the brain and into the occipital cortex in the back, the optic nerves are made up completely of neurons as well. Okay. And by the way, into the rest of the eyes, peripheral nerves run into the rest of the eyes. Okay. So the ocular nervous system is all the neurons that are distributed in the eyes and in the visual system. Now, to add into this, and we talk about this in phase 2 when we get to z-axis or depth, there are 6 extraocular muscles on each eye. There's 6 muscles that hold each eye in place and that move the eyes, and move each eye independently, but do it in a way that brings focus. And these extraocular muscles are incredibly sensitive, and they are loaded with neurons and nerve endings and neuronal pathways. Okay, and the nerves that come out of these extraocular muscles also go right into the vagus nerve and into the vagus system. And I believe it's the first, second, and third cranial nerves also are in and come out of these extraocular muscles. I think that the retina and the optic nerves also carry the 5th cranial nerve, 5th, maybe the 6th. I'm not sure about that. So the eyes are loaded with neurons and neuronal pathways. Okay. Remember, what is a neuron? A neuron is a cell that communicates with other neurons. It sends information. Okay. Now, if you've ever had a client, when you ask, are you activated? Yes. Where do you feel it? And they say, I feel it in my eyes. Okay. We think symbolically, oh, it's something that they saw. And there's truth to that. But we don't think about it physiologically, that they're feeling it in their eyes and those neuronal pathways in the retina, in the optic nerve, and the extraocular muscles. Okay. And going back to the basic premise in brain spotting is that unprocessed trauma is lost in the nervous system. And we say lost in the nervous systems. And not like the entire, unprocessed trauma would be in the ocular nervous system. It's that it's in every nervous system altogether. Because every neuron in the body communicates with every other neuron in the body. So that's 6. And the last 2 are the sensory nervous system and the motor nervous system. I won't go into it that much because it's not as, it's more basic in certain ways. But here we have 8 nervous systems, and there's probably more. There's probably neurons that are distributed in other parts of our bodies, in ways that we haven't discovered yet. So the whole idea of this, so the NEM posits that all these nervous systems and all these neurons and neural pathways are holding information, but that most of it never comes close to conscious awareness. Now, in the Western culture, the value is placed on what's conscious, what we are consciously aware of. And what's held in the rest of us is ignored or rejected, to the degree that it's like it doesn't exist. But the NEM is a global model. It is not a Western model. It doesn't reject Western thought, but it is not imprisoned by Western. And again, you can think about this from your own cultures, how what I'm saying makes sense. And that as this information rises towards conscious awareness, most of it gets filtered out long before it gets close to conscious awareness. But what begins to get through on a sensory basis by what we see and what we hear, and very much what we feel in our bodies, and interestingly, what we smell, what we taste. You think about it, culture is incredibly sensory. Okay. It's the things that we see, it's the sounds, it's the music, it's the smell, it's the food, it's the rhythms. And it's and culture is very somatic. It is held in the body, it is felt in the body, it is communicated from body to body. So, and we have a saying in Brainspotting that culture comes before science. That goes along with the idea that our senses are much more rooted into our culture than they are rooted into our science. So all of this information comes up. Most of it is filtered out, but when it comes through in our senses, and there's no meaning or story to the senses. It's just, this is what it looks like, this is what it smells like, this is what it feels like, this is what it sounds like, this is what it tastes like. And from there, like I said, the neocortex, is the last one to get that information. And it is there to receive it and to interpret it. And as we learn and as we grow, we have more, the neocortex becomes wiser. But when the neocortex thinks that it is the only part of the most important, or the only part of the nervous system, then it is foolish. Okay. And it misinterprets things all the time. And then the information it gives back is faulty information that only confuses the rest of the nervous system. But I want to talk about this filtration process because it has a lot of relevance. There is a process, a concept called sensory gating. Gate, G-A-T-E, like the gate that opens up or closes down. Okay, and that sensory gating is the mechanism that filters out information that would overwhelm or be extraneous to the conscious parts of our nervous system. But if something is gated out, it doesn't mean it isn't there. It doesn't mean it's not affecting us. It just means it's not present or affecting us. We are not conscious of how it's affecting us. How many people have somatic conditions, have body pain, or who have issues of fatigue, or digestive issues, or all kinds of issues that are really in the nervous systems, that are affected by or carrying unprocessed trauma that will never be reached by talk therapy, never be reached by cognitive therapies, and they will not be reached by therapies that focus on language and thought, namely protocols, as an example. The frame, the brain spotting frame, is meant to receive and encompass all of the nervous systems, all of the sensory systems. But what happens when a system is carrying developmental trauma, that sensory gating is affected in many ways, but two primary ways. The first way is that if the information is overwhelming and the nervous system gates out or filters out too much of the information that should be coming through, that's when we have dissociation. That's when people are out of touch with themselves, when they're, you can call that they're numb or they're shut down. But when the gating system is not working, and that filtration system is not working enough, the gate is too open and too much is coming through, and that's when we have the conditions of hyper arousal, such as anxiety, panic, rage, OCD, all of the overwhelms. So we either have too much gating, which is dissociation and hypoarousal, or not enough gating and too much information and hyperarousal. In that context, hyperarousal gets a lot more attention than hypoarousal. And I have an example of this. We have the SUD scale, 0 to 10. It's used in brain spotting. It's used in EMDR. It comes originally from behavioral therapy. Okay. It rates from the lowest to the highest level of activation. Generally speaking, when people come into us, and they have developmental trauma and they have a lot of symptoms or manifestations, we see that the SUDS numbers are high. Are you activated? Yes. How much 0 to 10? 8, 9, 10, 10 plus. That's hyper arousal. But those people, when you ask, are you activated? No, or not much. How much 0 to 10? 1 or 2. We've been taught, well, that's a problem. They have to have more activation to process, which is a complete misread. It's completely ignorant of the fact that the person is experiencing hypoarousal. Okay. So the idea that a person has to have a high enough activation for you to work with them is wrong. It doesn't make any sense. Diagnostically, it just is showing that the person is more highly dissociative. They're more in a freeze state. Okay. And with people like that, as you find the spot, whether it's a gaze spot or a pointer spot, oftentimes as the processing goes on, the SUDS will start to rise. Okay. And a person will say, I don't like how that feels. I'm starting to feel upset. I'm starting to feel, my body doesn't feel good. But it's really that they're coming out of hypoarousal. Okay. Now, I'm going to match this up to the response to threat, the human and mammalian response to threat. The first response to threat in our nervous system is flight. The idea of fight or flight is wrong. Flight comes before fight. flight is that response. There's that, the nervous system, the limbic system picks up the potential threat, quickly assesses it and activates the system, the systems, survival systems to come online and the secondary systems to go offline. And the first impulse is to create distance from the threat. But the signal is activation, the dangers, the appropriate survival signal is activation, we call anxiety. Okay. And from there, the mammal immediately goes into the flight response to create distance, to create a space of safety from the potential threat. If that doesn't work, okay, if flight is thwarted, then the mammal will go into fight. Okay. By the way, when the mammal goes from flight to fight, it's not like the flight goes away. It's like the flight is frozen in space. So when the mammal goes from flight into fight, there's the frozen flight underneath it. Okay. And fight, the fight response, if you've ever seen an animal go into the fight response, especially if you have a pet, a cat or a dog, and they feel cornered, you see their face changes, they show their teeth, they look kind of weird and scary, okay? And they may hiss, they may bark, they may snap at you with their teeth, and so on. That's the fight response. I relate the flight response to anxiety and panic and the fight response to anger and rage. Okay. And as they say, if fight doesn't work, then the mammal goes into freeze. Okay. And freeze is the immobility. Okay. I think there's different kinds of freezes. I won't go into that in great depth at the moment. But when the mammal goes into freeze, it's not like the fight is gone. It's like, just like the flight was frozen and the animal went into fight, when the animal goes from fight into freeze, the fight is frozen along with the flight. So they're both still present, even if they're not visible or not active at that time. All right. So going back to the hyperarousal, the hypoarousal, the sensory gating, the filtration, that the flight response associated with anxiety and panic and the fight response associated with anger and rage are both hyperarousal states. Flight and fight are hyperarousal states. Freeze is the hypoarousal state. Okay. So we usually will look and say, is the person more hyperaroused or hypoaroused? Well, they're all mixed up together. Okay. So that even when a person is in a freeze state, dissociation, numbness, shutdown, depression, that in that is still the hyperarousal of the flight and fight. Okay. Generally speaking, if someone is hyperaroused, anxiety, anger issues, there's freeze in there as well. It's all mixed together. So it's very, very complex, but swinging this all back to the 8 different nervous systems. All of this is in all nervous systems, all at the same time. Because all of these neurons are communicating with each other. All these nerve pathways are communicating with each other all the time. Okay. Dissociation, okay, may be an inability of certain neurons to be communicating with other neurons at the same time, which is how a person might be feeling out of touch with their emotions, or it's how they may be out of touch with their body experience. One last thing on this. If you ask a client, they have an issue, and you ask if they're activated, and they're not able to identify any emotions, and there, and you say, well, where do you feel it in your body? Oh, it's the SUDS is a 5. Where do you feel it in your body? I don't feel it in my body. There is this false belief that if a client is not feeling the emotions or not feeling the body sensations, that you can't work with them. Okay. That's saying if a client is in a state of hypoarousal, you can't work with them, which is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. The SUDS is a thermometer. It doesn't tell you whether the person is going to be responsive or not to the process. It just tells you how hot or how cold the temperature is, and hyperarousal tends to be more that like the heat where the thermometer goes up, and hypoarousal tends to be more like the cold where the temperature goes down. So those are my concepts about the 8 different nervous systems and sensory gating and hyper and hypoarousal and how it's all mixed together. So I know that's a lot of information. And again, the last piece is that our hypothesis is that the eye positions in brain spotting give us access through the ocular nervous system into all the other nervous systems and give us access to experience, especially unprocessed trauma. Chantal, I mean, you've heard this before, but now this is the second time you're hearing this. How does this resonate with you?
Each time it just takes me into seeing how everything's so interconnected and how we do feel things sensory wise before it comes to conscious awareness. And there were 2 things that came to mind when you were sharing that. One was when you spoke about the senses last time, and I'm not sure if you said it here and I might have missed it, about the sense of smell and how it's that sense that's different to all the other senses and how it
Yeah.
goes directly to
Yeah,
that.
I'll just informationally, all the senses except smell are routed into the thalamus, and then the thalamus routes them out to the different parts of the brain and the body. Okay, except for the sense of smell. Smell doesn't go to the thalamus, it goes directly to the amygdala. Okay. So that and again, we're wired on purpose. It's because something about smell, the immediacy of smell is so important for us to pick up on things, whether it's fire, smoke, whether it's toxic fumes, or, maybe the scent of a predator. Something about that needs to be even faster than all the other senses. So
Bacteria in food right before you eat something as well. That could be fatal.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All based on toxins. Yeah.
And then in terms of the sensory gating, it also took me back to Demir Dormont's talk at the Brainspotting conference many years ago, where he spoke about it wasn't the same thing. He was talking about a particular part of the brain that does a similar thing with gating sensory input. And I can't remember the numbers, but he was saying something along the lines of how we only can perceive a very tiny percentage of the actual input that comes in because it buffers our awareness of the sensory input. However, when there's cortisol, so when there's high stress, the cortisol impairs the functioning of that region of the brain and it no longer filters or buffers or gates, and more sensory information is coming in that we can actually perceive. So then our pain threshold, everything, we feel it more. So cold, we are feeling the full impact of cold. Pain, we're feeling the full impact of pain. It made me think of that he shared at the Brainspotting conference many years ago, but I'm not sure if I understood it 100% because he's like a neuroscientist. But does that go along the same lines with the
Yeah.
gating?
But was he talking about the default mode network?
Oh God, this was so many years ago.
Okay. He gives a lot of attention to that, so that might have something to do with it. I don't have the technical answer to that, but yes, all processes are complicated.
Mm,
They're all
yeah,
complicated. So
the body's amazing.
yeah, the body and the nervous system is infiltrated and integrated throughout the entire body.
Yes.
All the body systems, you know. Um, neurotransmitters are created in the gut. Okay, serotonin is created in the gut. We think about, serotonin, well, that's a brain chemical. Well, it's a body chemical. So again, from all of this, let's open the floor to questions or comments. And
Yes.
it can go in any direction. I'll answer anything.
And there's one graduate, while we're waiting for hands to come up, she wanted to join today. She's phase 2 and in supervision, but she's going to watch the recording. She was in supervision yesterday and she shared something very amazing. She wears a whip in her sessions and it measures the changes of heart rate variability.
Yeah.
And she could track during the day where her heart rate was. And even when she would have a gym session, it went up. And then when she would have brain spotting sessions, so not all her sessions in the day, it would go higher than the gym session. And she could actually see on the timeline where she would do brain spotting. And she's completely calm. She's like, I'm completely calm. But it's the, what was the word? It's the arousal of our systems being switched on in that moment. So it's healthy stress in the attunement with the person in front of you. And possibly also limbically, whatever may be going on there as well. But you can see it in every brain spotting session. It peaks, even compared to physical activity.
Yeah, and when you were just talking about it, so I was thinking about attunement.
Yes.
Okay.
And for Zoom as well. One of the sessions was online and one was in person, identical.
Well, it doesn't
Yeah.
make it, my experience is it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
Um, Attunement comes from we think of our limbic system in terms of, response to threat, but our limbic system is also based on social engagement and empathy and connection and so on. By the way, when we talk about relational healing, talk about communal healing, it's the limbic systems of many people together, um, uh, experiencing each other together. Um, uh, we are very limbically activated by our experience with and exposure to our clients.
Yes.
Okay. And when they're talking about things or things are coming up that are very, traumatic and painful and frightening and all of these things, our limbic system feels it. Our limbic system, because of its capacity for empathy, will uh, will feel it and get activated. That's why, sometimes we'll lose attunement because it kicks us into our threat response. The threat response is very narcissistic, not in a judgmental way. It's survival is all about us right in that moment. So when our limbic system feels like it's threatened, not because there's any danger, but what the client is presenting holds things that are frightening or painful, that's when we can lose attunement. But no doubt about it, when a therapist is working with all kinds of different models and is coming from assumptions and from certainty and is making all kinds of interventions and so on, I'll bet you the heart rate variability does not spike like that in the same way as when a brain spotting therapist is sitting in uncertainty and mindfully receiving and holding the frame and is in the tail of the comet, that quiet presence leading to attunement is what causes that.
Yes, and
More,
she's one of the most attuned characters.
okay, there you go.
Yes.
There you go. Let me ask you, in the MENA cultures, how is attunement particularly part of the culture, or cultures?
I can only speak from my own perspective, but I feel that sitting and attuning in silence, in my opinion, this is my perspective from what I've seen in my culture around me, it's organic. It's much more sitting with someone. If somebody's, it's not to say that it's not also shared with Western cultures, but it is sitting. It's like I'm sitting with you. I'm here with you, and it is that attunement. It's in the unspoken word. It's in the felt sense. It's like I feel that. I just need to hold your hand right now, whatever it might be, or it's non-verbal. I feel it's very much part of our culture because that's what I grew up with when I look at my family. But I'm mindful not to make sweeping statements because even culturally, there are subcultures within cultures that are different. But from what I've noticed in my perspective is I feel it's a deeply attuned. Attunement is something that is really much part of our culture more than in Australia, for example, where it's more neocortical, it's more about learning, it's more about understanding. Whereas here, I feel it's more about the heart, it's more about feeling, it's more about connecting. That's my experience. I feel attunement is it's more organic over here. Yeah. We have a few hands raised.
Okay, good.
Yes. First we had Noha, but then you put your hand down. Oh, you've just got to unmute yourself.
Yeah. It's like, how do you raise your hand anyway? I'm trying to do it.
Oh, Dr. Charlie, you can go next.
No, sorry, I don't want to cut anybody, but I'm really trying to find the hand from like an hour ago.
I think it's
Can I
at the
find
bottom
it?
that there's
Because
something
I
that
put my
says
hand
react, and then there's on the bottom it says
react. Yeah.
and then you click the
You can
little
just raise
up
your
arrow.
hand and it'll
I
raise
did
your
an hour
hand.
ago. I did an
Oh, I
hour
can't
ago.
see everyone's pictures. And
I
just
know.
say raise hand, I think. But you
Is
go
it?
after.
Is it raising? No, it's okay. I just wanted to know how to do it. It still didn't work, but it's fine. I'll do it later after.
Okay.
Okay,
Hi.
Noha?
Yeah, hi. I was going to ask or comment also about the hypoactivation because I found that something I struggled with. So so I'm a phase 1 practitioner, and I've been using it a lot. And when you were talking about that difference between how easy it is for us to identify the hyperarousal versus the hypoarousal, really stuck with me because I see it very successful when the activation is obviously, right? It's because it's what's external we notice, like how we notice kids with hyperactivity before we notice the ones masking their hyperactivity. They're both hyper, right? But they're presenting it differently. So it just got me thinking that when I do get concerned with myself, like, and I don't want them to sense that. I don't want them to sense any kind of uncertainty or anything. So I tend to generally offer brain spotting when there is hyperarousal. I noticed that I'm doing that without realizing it, So I wanted to get your feedback or insight, or, like when there is somebody who doesn't really feel any connection in their body, or they're not maybe in tune with any activation, if there is any, when you ask, I've had a couple of those that, where do you feel it in your body? I feel nothing. Okay. And then I can take
Let me step in.
Yeah.
Where did you get the idea that it's a problem when a person says, I'm not feeling anything in my body?
No, I didn't mean it that it's a problem. I think it was like maybe it was one of the first cases that I was practicing it with. And I got flustered, because it was probably the first case. So I was like, okay. And like, we stayed there and, we kept going. There was some activation eventually, but your comment made me think about, what about when someone is in a state of freeze, and is really not noticing it. And then I realized, that I don't think that's actually happened where there's been like no activation. So I'm thinking.
First of all, if a person says, if you ask, what are you feeling in your body? They say, I'm not feeling anything in my body. That's their neocortex talking. The neocortex at that point is shut out and shut off from body experience. But to think that, oh, well, they're not feeling anything in their body. Their body is active just as much as someone who's got a SUDS of 10.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just the neocortex is not able to read those somatic cues.
Mhm.
All right. Which again should at least make us curious. But again, there's this. So actually, when a person is hypoaroused, underneath the hypoarousal, their body is extremely hyperaroused. That's what's causing the hypoarousal. The flight, fight, the anxiety, anger that led to the freeze, to the shutdown, is boiling underneath. So for us, all we need to do is to know that. Okay. Um, uh, and to proceed accordingly. But here's from a technical brain spotting point of view, the answer to that is if the client, if you try inside window, do you feel it more to your right, more in the middle, more to your left? And you go back and no difference. Okay. That's not a problem. That's never a problem. The easiest go-to place for people with hypoarousal is gaze. Okay. People in a state of hypoarousal gaze very powerfully. You know, for someone who has combat trauma or someone who's coming out of a very abusive background, or they tend to that we say, like, they stare off into space. You know, they're not staring off into space. They're in an altered state of consciousness that is focused around that eye position. Okay, so you go straight to gaze spotting. You know, and they will gaze spot all the time, and you can use it all the time. So I don't know if that responds to your.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that's why we have all these tools.
Yeah.
But brain spotting, we ask if they're activated, not because they need to be activated, but because we're kind of taking their temperature. And when we ask, are they activated, we're also kind of asking, are you more hyper aroused or hypo-aroused? Just remember, inside of hypo-arousal is always hyper-arousal. And inside of hyper-arousal is always hypo-arousal. You know, the flight, fight, and freeze are always mixed together. That's something you probably haven't heard before.
Not really, no.
even though it makes sense.
It does. That absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
That's what I think, that was what made me raise my hand, because it felt like the light bulb went off, when you were talking.
Yeah. Again, if someone is in a state of hypoarousal, we should see the power of the hypoarousal. Not misread it as being that nothing's happening. It's things were overloading so much that the system had to shut down. Anyhow, thank you. Want to say something, or?
No, I was gonna. I have another comment. I'll make it later about the
Okay.
the culture.
Okay.
Thank you
Great.
for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have a couple. We might go to Tala next. Something that I say when someone has no felt sense is like, I would be processing, but your body's giving you a break from having to feel anything. So just enjoy having a nice break. You don't necessarily need to feel it. Tala, are you with us? Dr. Tala.
Hi, yes, hi.
Yes.
Hi,
She's
everyone.
the first
See some
Saudi
faces.
practitioner.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, hi, David. It's such a
Hi,
pleasure
Tala.
to be here and to meet you in person. We all heard so much about you in phase one, so it's really nice to be here. I mean, there are a couple of things, I don't know, because of the time, if we leave it till later, I wanted to reflect. I wanted to reflect on, because on your curiosity about how it's working in the Middle East. I think I'd love to kind of reflect on that, and other points that we discussed. I think we all recognize that even in the West, they're moving away from the medical model into into more of a holistic models with the rise of the somatic experiencing and the yoga movements and the breath work, isn't it? I think that's and of course with the internet, a lot of these ideas are also, of course, being recognized around the world, including the Middle East and the Islamic world. Now, a lot of people, when we come to think about it, we were talking about, are people accepting the brain spotting or not? I'll talk about myself. I am Saudi. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I was taught in England specifically, my master's, my doctorate. And so I'm very, very culturally aware of my culture, and I'm very, very much aware of my religion. So automatically, I do understand that, again, there is a lot of resistance to Western ideas in my culture, which is rightly so. I really believe every culture has, I mean, every part of the world have their own culture, and it's not black and white. We pick up from the different cultures and we bring in what's really lovely about it, and knowledge is the same thing. And the smart way to go about it, especially with cultures that are very, very collective and very let's say how do you say that, not protect, like it's very, I mean, for us, religion, of course, is a very bonding experience, and it's very looked at that it's a lot of us, not everybody, lives by the let's say belief systems of it, or especially like in Saudi, it's a very much of a the religion is very prominent. So there's a smart way of bringing the ideas in. You see, I think when I worked in the UK, I also adapted. So I think first of all, being a culturally sensitive therapist is key to any modality that we learn, I think. And even when I studied in the West, I was very surprised in a place that's very, very eclectic, that a lot of there wasn't cultural sensitivity a part of the training. Although, let's say, a place like London, we had Muslims, we had Jews, we had Sikh. It's like we needed to know. So I remember in the programs, I would always say, oh, Muslims do this because they will be working with a Muslim family, and they'd be like, it's an X thing. I'm like, no, just let's relax, let's understand where they're coming from, and let's work on the OCD of the praying. Let's work on. So it's really great, of course, through these mediums and through us being very globalized and these questions, I think, and also the trainings to bring in cultural sensitivity. I think
Tell
it's
them
very,
to
very
pack their
important and very
stuff.
crucial. Sorry, did anyone? Yeah. So again, I think with the MENA region is very, very, it's exactly the same. People, of course, we're all exposed to everything around the world, and people are very open. I think it's opposite than what we might feel like. People are really, really closed off. I think it's how you present it. And of course, brain spotting is one of these things that I felt it was very easy to kind of integrate, to be honest. So that's the first thing. I think being a culturally sensitive therapist, it would be very important, just to answer that, like, how does brain spotting fit in? And with any other modalities. Personally, when I moved back after doing my master's and integrated more into kind of breaking that stigma, definitely I brought in culture and I adapted what I learned, for sure. I adapted it to what I know from the culture. I adapted it to what I know from my religion, and it's really worked beautifully. So even if you find resistance, I think it's the way how the client, and I learned a lot from how the therapist, and I learned a lot from the client. So I think, as far as like that, how would it fit in? I think it fits in perfectly. I think how the us as brain spotters, how do we present it to the region? Maybe adding I know from Chantel, she was saying that there are mini courses of like working with brain spotting and, let's say, sexual abuse brain spotting, and this maybe also it's nice to add, working brain spotting and a MENA region, or I think with cultural sensitivity, I think that's really it will be very interesting just to see how things gelled in from other people's experiences. So that's just to reflect how the people were open or not, or trusting or not. I think the other factor is the relationship, as we know, with the clients and how they feel with you. Personally, I am a clinical psychologist. 25 years in the field. So when I first started, like there was a lot of apprehension on mental health anyway. It's like, we're not crazy. If you're religious, then you're not going to have mental health issues. But with time, of course, and just fitting it culturally and from a religious point of view as well, thinking of, as you said, mindfulness, thinking of even the heart cohesion, I think, nervous system regulation. So I'm also a holistic psychologist, and I also work with psychosexual dysfunctions. So I think also to talk about sex in the region, that takes a lot of being very culturally sensitive. So bringing in this awareness, I think, with brain spotting specifically, because people are very aware of the polyvagal theory, and very much aware of EMDR. I think it's very easy to kind of bring it in as well. Understanding things like the math, the Heart Math Institute, and how when you're talking about the heart-mind cohesion. Actually, in Islam, we have a saying from the Prophet, and that's what I use with the clients when I talk about the polyvagal or brain spotting and the attunement. I talk about there is a saying with the Prophet, or hadith we call it, very specifically. It says that the souls meet, and this is where I always say, so even when we're sitting here, we are attuned, our souls meet, our heart, and I talk about the heart, the scientific part of it and the religious part of it. So also the language that I think the therapist use is very, very important. And again, we learn a lot, like my colleagues, from our clients, because they come and say, yeah, but in Islam, this is what the Prophet says, and this is how we become more cultivated. So it really, really fits in with mindfulness, as our colleague said about the ta'ammul. It's just also bringing it in, I think, to people who are into that. I mean, not all of our clients are practicing Muslims, or, so of course you have to be sensitive. So I think, just to answer these questions from my perspective, and Saudi, if we save maybe, how people are, I think people trusting me, people knowing me. I personally don't do it like Chantal right away. I'm not just a brain spotting therapist. I am I'm a psychodynamic, so I work with complex trauma, so I integrate it into my work when I'm doing reliving. And I'm phase 2. So from phase 1, I just jumped into it. The beautiful thing is, and I sent Chantal text, my clients, because now I'm ending for the summer, they're like, after the brain spotting, we were apprehensive, but we felt like there's a portal that opened. We felt very connected. So I get my strength from my clients. They're very willing to try it because I have a relationship with them. So again, having trust with the clients, them trusting me, me explaining it to them from a brain processing, from attunement, from the unconscious, as well as a psychodynamic therapist, it all fits in. So I think it's one of the modalities I feel, if any, it's very easy to fit in with our culture. Just to answer the question, with the multifaceted, I think, approaches, the knowledge of the therapist is also important. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more about the need for cultural sensitivity, cultural respect, cultural wisdom. And I think it's absent from the Western scientific approach applied to psychotherapy. It's absolutely absent. We talk about taking a history. We haven't been taught to take a cultural history. We form a diagnosis, but culture never is never taken into the diagnostic process, which is to understand what something is and where it's coming from. And if we are culturally insensitive, we're not only going to miss that, but we're going to traumatize the client. So again, when I did the origins of Brainspotting's development, was that I developed everything about it from the beginning and all the way through to be at least culturally neutral, and if beyond that, to be culturally inviting. So, and in the way that you infuse your culture into brain spotting, we see it as an enriching brain spotting. What you and everybody here is bringing of your culture into brain spotting. Okay, we're not just open to it, we're seeking it out. Okay, we're placing high value on it, and that is a complete departure from the Western viewpoint and the Western lens, and our clients need and deserve it. You know, how can you be attuned to a person without being culturally attuned? And as Chantal said before, we're not just talking about cultures, we're talking about subcultures.
Mhm.
No.
Yeah, to reflect on the attunement, because you're asking about attunement, and when Chantal was reflecting, I also thought of our let's say again, because the MENA region and Islam, it's such an attuned religion, like other religions. We're talking about Islam, because we pray 5 times a day, and we pray together. There's that silence in the prayers, you know, or if it's in Ramadan, or if it's, you know, so a lot of our daily, you know, and even when people are working in some of the most of the like in the malls in Dubai as well, when there's a call for prayer, everybody goes to the prayer room, so you're together. So that attunement, I think our nervous system is always used to, I mean, as children growing up, because you're with your aunt, with your uncles, and you see the family day. So actually, attunement is something I think embedded even in our nervous system. So I think people who are open, because anyway, anywhere around the world, we know if the client is not open, no matter what you do, no matter how culturally sensitive you are, you know, if someone is closed and they're not ready, they're not ready. But when people are ready, you know, I think they attune very, very quickly, because our nervous system is used to, as you said, or our heart, you know, our electromagnet are used to picking up and attuning, you know, extra maybe. So just to answer on that attunement, yeah.
In terms of readiness, again, the brain spotting frame concept is that from the first session and every follow-up session, we are mindfully aware that the client is going to bring in their own unique in the moment frame of their own neuro experience, who they are and how they are and where they are, and that we mindfully receive it and mindfully hold it with them. Okay, without any precondition. Okay, without any idea of, well, this is what we're going to do today. It is totally open, you know, it can only be open to the client and their neuro experience of the moment, and as it goes from there. In practical application, that is highly different from most therapy models. Okay, but as such, it is, to me, that it's also highly culturally attuned. When we talk about neuro experience, culture is part of neuro experience. So we're receiving the client in their own culture of what it is for them in their nervous system and what it is for them spiritually, you know. And again, that's the brain spotting approach, ethos, attitude, you know, and it's very non-Western psychologically. Anyhow, thank you so much.
That was amazing. And it brought up a lot of thoughts for me, but more importantly, we need to go to some more raised hands rather than me showing what it brought up for me. And the next one is Nusrat. So Nusrat, you have your hand raised.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. First of all, my gratitude for for Brainspotting, the way we are learning it and the way we are incorporating it in our practice sessions and with the clients. This is more of a reflection, because since the point you started speaking, David, up until now, it has only validated my practice. And I think that is like a confidence booster for me personally. I'm a phase 2 graduate, and it means a lot. And it means a lot because I quickly want to talk about a recent, you can say one of my clients, where this client I've been seeing for 1.5 years, extremely verbal client. Like he literally sends me his journal every week so that, I should know what he's going, what's happening and all of it. And in this 1.5 year, there was no history of trauma that was reported at all. And when he just checked my profile on the internet recently, and he saw the term Brainspotting practitioner, and that's how he became curious. And he said, Nusrat, I read this. What is this about? So I just kind of gave him the basics about it, and I sent him a few links. And after like, I think almost 4 to 5 sessions, he comes up and he says, I'm curious to just practice this. And I ask him, is there any reason? So he says, no, we've been working since 1.5 year and everything's going well. But I'm curious about this therapy modality. And I was like, okay, fine, let's do it. And when we did our first session, this client who speaks so much, and whatever you were speaking about, the neuroexperiential model thing, I was seeing this client like step by step, the hyperarousal. So when he begins, he says, I don't have a frame. I don't know what I want to work on. I'm just here. I just want to experiment it. So the curiosity. And I think with the supervision that Chantal is providing, it has made me more confident in sitting with the uncertainty. Because trust me, when we began this, or when I began this, the psychodynamic part, the trained part in me just would come up and like, no, but this is this, and trying to make, my own cognitive interference was present. But Alhamdulillah, I've been learning to be just curious and just be there and just follow the comet principle. And this guy does not speak for an entire like 50 minutes, not a single word. And this was not him. And all he's doing is processing. When I ask him for the validation, is there any activation? He says 0. This is how he just points out 0. And when we are going through the session, there is only one thing that keeps coming up. That is, my skin is burning. And this was the first time I kind of, you can say, heard something like this. People talk about the way you said, the heart, the gut and all of it. But skin was the first time. And he was like, my skin burns. It burns as if someone's put too many chilies on it and they're scrubbing it on my skin. And that's how powerfully it feels. And I don't question him. We go through the process, we finish it. And in between, the hyperarousal comes up where he starts rating on 10 on 10. Can we have a 20 on 20? And at one point he asked me, we need the scale not from 0 to 10. I need it from 0 to 100. That's how intensely I'm feeling in my body. And we keep going. We finish the session. And after 1 week, when he comes back, because I didn't prod him, what happened, tell me which instance, nothing. I was like, okay, this is your moment. You've processed it. And he leaves. And when he comes back, he sits down and he says, I don't want to do Brainspotting today, but I want to discuss about what I felt and what I experienced. And he literally experienced everything of the NEM, the processing part that you mentioned, and that validates how beautifully it came up for him. Of course, it was a very painful memory, 15 years before him being sodomized by his mentor. And that is something he said, I never thought about it once in my dream, once in my life. I just put it away. And this comes up, and the burning skin sensation. And there's one thing that he mentioned just 2 days ago, I was struggling with it. And in my mind, I was saying, I was raped by him. And there was something in me that came out when I was writing that I just rephrased that into he raped me and I'm not responsible for it. He said that the burning sensation in the skin literally dropped, and that was like, I was just looking at him. I didn't know what to do. I was just looking at him. And he said that this is something I've never shared with anyone. And this is the first time I'm sharing this. And yeah, so I was literally like with this client when it was your voice, and I was just going through the session again. So thank you for this amazing model that we have, and how beautifully the clients come up with their own processing, and they're so powerful, and we get to witness this. That is, I think, a very big honor for all of us, that we get to witness the processing and they allow us to do that. So yeah, so all the points that you were mentioning about the NEM, it just, for me right now, they were like literally clicking. In that moment, I was not able to understand what happened, because I didn't have an explanation. So today, whatever you mentioned, I can say, okay, fine, this is how it worked in reality. So yeah, I just wanted to share this, and thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And it had to be an amazing experience for you to see what happened with him. That was so unexpected and so unusual and so powerful. And again, this man, like all of our clients, deep inside, he knew what he needed, you know, and he saw on your profile Brainspotting, and he intuitively knew that he needed that. And then he asked, and he had this amazing session. And when he came in for the next session, he knew he needed to talk about it, you know, and so what you were doing is you were receiving and holding and shaping the frame with him, as we talk about in the NEM. So thank you.
Thank you. And one last suggestion that has come up from a client, because we are talking about how this culturally fits in. One of my clients said that we have the bilateral music that we ask our clients to put on, and we have the Puranic recitation or something instead of the music. I mean, that was just a suggestion, like, is that possible? And I was like, okay, let me check. So I was going to meet Shanti and ask her, like, how does that work and all of it. But yeah, so I believe Brainspotting, the clients come up, it's like they help the process to evolve. The therapist is just there, but the feedback that we keep getting from clients, I think that is so, so precious. And the way they bring it up, that helps us to refine the way we are actually holding the space.
I mean, if nowadays there are computer programs that you can, you know, have sound go back and forth, you know, what I used to have to do in a sound studio with huge equipment can be done in computer programs. And so whatever sound fits culturally, I mean, say absolutely. You know, the only question I have is that when there are words involved in this, that sometimes the processing may not go as deep as if it's just sound, you know, but you'd have to try that out. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. And the next hand we have up, we have a few. Luna again, if you want to unmute.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to share a reflection that came up when we were talking about attunement and culture. It's a personal reflection, but also a question. So, how much of our attunement with our clients is born or could be born as a result of our own hypervigilance, having been born and raised in a country or many countries in the Middle East, which are affected by wars and traumas. We all have a lot of intergenerational trauma. And as a result, obviously, our parents, I mean, especially, I don't know whoever is on the call here, whose parents have been affected by war trauma, whether it's Lebanon, Palestine, Syria. And so when our parents were going through that, naturally, they weren't very readily available for us. I'm talking personally, us as the practitioners. And so for me personally, I come from a very loving family, but both my parents experienced war several times as I was growing up. And so I recognize personally that I have experienced parental abandonment, despite the fact that my parents were very loving and present. But it's because they were stuck within their own nervous systems and dealing with whatever, you know, financial burdens, moving homes, moving countries. And so when we see, when you're the child of a parent who's neglectful, and I don't mean it in a negative sense, but they are neglectful, you naturally become very hypervigilant to those around you, because that's how you're gonna, you know, keep the peace, find the love that you're looking for, the belonging. And I notice a lot of people within my circles who are quite sensitive, attuned. We can read bodies and cues very easily. And I'm wondering how much of that affects our own attunement within sessions. And then when we bring up culture, those clients that come in who are talking to us about very similar experiences. So we are holding and shaping the frame with them. I just feel like with specific clients who come in with a lot of, war, intergenerational, or anything similar that we might have passed with, I think to sum up, what my first point is, I feel like those of us who grew up hypervigilant, maybe, and it's just a theory, it's a question to you now, does that make us more attuned? And the second one is just about that shaping of the frame with clients, and how much of our own experience raises the attunement. What I've noticed in sessions, when it has to do with anything that I have in commonality with the client, those are the sessions that when I go home, I feel like my battery is completely drained and I need to eat a lot and sleep a lot, and because the attunement is just so strong in those sessions. I'm attuned with all my clients, but some of them specifically, I do notice a drastic shift in the residue with me. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. It's a really interesting question, and it's a really complex and challenging question. So there are aspects that are intuitive, there are aspects that are counterintuitive of what I'm going to say. Now, I'd say a very specific example of the hypervigilance you're talking about is being able to read people's faces. Like you had to read your mother's face or your father's face. And there's a real hypervigilance to that, and the speed at which you could do that and pick up on things becomes so accelerated, like even before you see the face, what you hear and what you feel is like, um, part of the problem is with true hypervigilance is that you end up misreading cues, or mistiming cues, So on the one hand, you get hyper attuned, but on the other hand, it affects your attunement at the same time. It can. And if it's coming out of trauma-based survival instinct, it would seem like it's going to draw us more into ourselves, okay? Which would seem like it would make us less attuned, okay? But here's what's what I was referring to by counterintuitive. We ended up choosing to become therapists, and all the different ways that we choose to become therapists. All the other people who were exposed to the same stuff chose to be things other than therapists. And it's not random, it's not a random selection that we end up becoming the therapists. We find our way into it. But it's not just because we were forced to hyper attune to our parents and to our environments. Okay. It's who we were, how we came into this world. Generational experience is there also. Okay. But remember, what we receive generationally or from our ancestors is as much their resilience and adaptation and giftedness as it was their traumas. So all that comes through. But those of us who become therapists, especially very attuned therapists, before we met the trauma, we were very attuned to our environments. And we were very attuned to emotional states, and we were attuned to when people were feeling happy. We were attuned to when people were feeling sad, So I think sadness and grief is something we have a gift to tune into. And not so much, anxiety, anger, all that stuff is there, but I'm saying just like the grief sense. And it's something natural in people who choose to become therapists. Not 100%, but a high percentage of this. So it's that innate giftedness for tuning into people, you know, and their emotional states, and to be concerned about it, and to be empathic, you know, that if you see someone who's suffering, that your emotional state is to not want them to suffer, you know, and to want to do something about it. That's like that core ethos of the biological ethos of the therapist. Um, so that's already part of who we are, and that becomes affected into from a trauma place of having to be hyper attuned to our parents' faces and their voices and their movements and so on. Um, so on the one hand, there's that gifted capacity for attunement and empathy, and then on the other hand, there's the traumatized part of it, you know. So, and I think when you go back after sessions and you're feeling, you know, wiped out and you need to eat or sleep or whatever it is, it's more the trauma-based stuff that got activated in you. And when you finish a day and you feel like kind of like just present, it's more just that you know, essential aspect of yourself that's there. The term limbic countertransference identifies for us the things that cause us to lose attunement. Okay, that's sort of the through line of the concept of limbic countertransference, and but the reason we have that concept is so that when we get the first glimmers that we're falling out of the tail of the client's comet, that we recognize that something about us is being limbically activated, and we just at least notice it, but maybe quickly say, you know, have a sense of, well, what's this activating in me? And then quickly we try to work our way back into the tail of the comet. So I would say all of us here in this space came into this world highly attuned, highly empathic, and caring about the feelings of others and caring about the suffering of others. You know, unfortunately, that gets taken advantage of by parents based on their own woundedness and their own needs. And that's why our own healing process is so important, you know, for us to, you know, if you have ongoing limbic countertransference to a particular client or to many clients, that's when you need to do some brain spotting yourself around that. And that's not just going to help you as a brain spotting therapist, that's going to help you in your own healing, most importantly. Any thoughts about my response?
What was interesting was how you said with certain clients, like it doesn't happen often. And with one of them, even though if I'm going to use my neocortex, I wouldn't say that what was being presented in that particular session I related to, like any countertransference. But I think on a limbic level, that's the part of maybe the culture. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense that it doesn't happen often, but I do note them down, and I think it's great advice to like you said, just note it down and then maybe reach out to a fellow practitioner and like ask for a brain spotting session after one of those, because just to see like kind of what happened.
Yeah, you see what comes up and out, and you follow it with curiosity.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
That was a beautiful question. And it also, in terms of the limbic countertransference, it made me think of when we did the trauma missions for the kids from Gaza, and we had made sure that the three of us had booked in some of our own, whatever we would need to clear afterwards after each day. And I remember one of our lovely grads in here was doing brain spotting on me in the afternoon straight afterwards. So clearing any limbic countertransference straight away, straight after that day. And on that note, one of the other amazing clinicians that was on that trauma mission has her hand up. Nina, do you want to unmute for your question?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone, and hi, David. It's such a pleasure to be here. and meet you in person. Again, we've heard a lot about you, especially Chantal, from Chantal. So my question is, I'm interested in working with children, and most of our work is with children and adolescents. So I wanted to ask you if you recommend using and how do you recommend using brain spotting with children who've been exposed to war and displacement, especially when the trauma is ongoing and they don't have, like, their sense of safety is not fully restored? And can we integrate it with play therapy and art therapy? If you have any suggestions.
Our international expert on using brain spotting with children is Monica with a K, Baumann, Baumann, and she gives classes on this, a lot. So I would look towards that. I want to give a couple of answers to your questions. What an adult might take 20 minutes to process on a spot with, a child can do in 20 seconds. Okay. Again, I'm telling you about what you already know about how children process things in play therapy much more quickly than adults process things. There's a natural gaze in play therapy, where based on what a child is doing, they're either looking at it, okay, or as they're doing it, they may be looking in a certain direction, and just encouraging them to keep on looking at what they're looking at for a short period of time, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, if it goes on a minute, something like that, is really all you have to do. And again, that makes use of their ocular nervous system to access whatever you're working on in the play therapy with them. So those opportunities present themselves all the time. Eye contact spotting, is really crucial in working with attachment trauma, but it doesn't have to be that they're looking in your eyes for 3 minutes straight. It can just be 5 seconds here, 5 seconds there, so on. So it's making use of the short bursts, those opportunities. But beyond that, I would encourage you to look for Monica Baumann's, online with this, or on the Brainspotting website. The other answer I want to give applies to children, but applies to people of all ages, with the kind of existential hyper traumas that people are exposed to, or getting exposed to. First of all, there's the issue of like where it began. When things went from okay to desperately not okay. Okay, and for some people, it's very clear. It's a very discrete moment in time. And for others, it's more a series of events. Okay, but what happens is that the nervous system registers in time sequence things that happen, especially things that happen traumatically, and it registers that first moment. The nervous system organizes itself around that first moment or first moments, whether it's a second or a minute or an hour or even a day, and the nervous system has a sense of how things were before, and the nervous system has a sense of how things drastically changed right at that pivotal moment. Okay. There's a spontaneous kind of gaze that goes along with this. When you and with a child, it's going to be different based on levels of communication. But when you have a client go back to that moment when things went from okay to desperately not okay, they will almost immediately orient with their eyes and oftentimes head and neck. You go back to that moment, you'll see something like this right away. It is remarkable. And I know it to be true with adolescents and adults, but I also believe it to be true with children. Although with an adolescent or an adult, when they go there, so just keep looking at that Go from that first moment, notice what you're feeling in your body, and watch the processing. And from there, the processing usually goes sequentially, because the traumatic events were imprinted sequentially. So they'll start from that first minute, that first hour, that first day, that first week, and things will start to process forward. Okay. And so that's going down those neural pathways of that sequential neuro experience. After if they keep going like that, you just keep going and going and going with them. But if things start to slow down, you bring them back to that first moment, that pivotal moment when things changed, drastically changed. And then you ask them, what does it look like or what does it feel like? And when that happens, you'll see that it tends to look and feel different. And sometimes the time sequence will change when you go back to that moment. It'll go back earlier in time, it'll go forward in time. But those are all the manifestations of the processing and the reprocessing. And whatever it is now, you have them, now that you've brought them back, what it looks like and feels like now, they process ahead from there. And it goes ahead sequentially with this. Now, what's really interesting to note in this is that in this sequencing, there's flashbacks of certain moments that were, hyper traumatic, but there's also gaps in the time sequence when there's certain things they don't remember what happened for a couple of minutes, a couple of hours, a couple of days, even a couple of weeks. So what you have is you have the flashback and you have that the dissociative amnesia, okay, that are on the timeline as you're processing, okay. And the flashbacks that are in the person's face are part of what gets blocked out with the dissociative amnesia. So as the flashbacks start to process and move backward, the information that was dissociated starts to come forward, okay? And it begins to take on a more integrated, sequential experience of what happened. The whole thing about trauma and having trauma symptoms, manifestations, is that it's coming directly from the parts of the person that are stuck at that time and at that place, who are unable to be in the here and now because their nervous systems, parts of the nervous systems, are trapped in the then and there. So as the processing goes on, as the healing goes on, gradually they go from the then and there to the here and now, as you go through that sequential process. Bringing us back to kids and where things are ongoing, you can only work with the nervous system in the context that it's in. But even if things are ongoing, that doesn't mean you can't work with the nervous system. Okay, the nervous system will heal in the context of what's still ongoing. It won't heal in the same way as if it was over, but there is healing that comes out. And it's done in the here and now and the present, and it's done in the relational frame, and it will happen however it happens. You can't predict it, you can't control it, you can't preordain it, okay? It'll happen however it happens. The degree to which you believe a person can heal, and this is for everybody, this is also for the specific population you're talking about, the degree that you believe that the person can heal, and this is why doing brain spotting is so important if you actually believe it. And you end up believing it not because you were told it by your trainer. You believe it because you experienced it with client after client after client. The more you believe that a person can heal, the more you're going to bring that with you and hold that in the frame. And the person will feel that, and the child will feel that. And experience is in the moment, healing is in the moment, and trauma is out of the moment. So the more they come into the moment with you, the more their nervous system is going to start to heal. And what we hope is that what they face in the ongoing traumas, that their capacity for resilience will be elevated, and their hyper traumatized state will be reduced by degree. When it comes to, on the one hand, all the high activation, and on the other hand, the freeze, what we're trying to do is lower the ceiling of that hyperactivation and to raise the floor of that, of the freeze, of the drop of the freeze. How did you receive and process, what I said?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I like what you said when you said bringing them in the moment. I guess it's part of like letting them know that now in this moment they are safe, and trying to work on their window of tolerance as much as we can with what we have. I'm trying to think of when we went to that mission. We didn't do, and that will take us a bit to what we were talking about in the beginning about the cultural aspect of the brain spotting or how it can be integrated. So with Chantal, we divided the teachers. We did it with the adults into 3 groups. And I took a group, Chantal took a group, and our colleague also took a group, and we did brain spotting with them. And I was thinking, like, what is Chantal doing? I don't know this, like, how are we going to do brain spotting in groups? And how is it going to be? And I was so worried that they're going to be very activated, or I'm going to lose someone, or it worked beautifully. And I think part of it is because of the communal and collective culture that we have. I think it worked better than if we had done it one-on-one. I think it's because it's a culture based on a lot of on food, on language, on family oriented. They felt much safer, I think, that we were together, and it was beautiful. And until today, these teachers that we work with, and Chantal knows that, they tell me that they're asking us when are we coming again, and how helpful it was that we went there. And just to let you know, that was one day that we did with 2 different groups of teachers, but one day. So I think this is where we integrated beautifully the cultural element, the collective aspect of this culture with brain spotting.
And I'm speaking personally from me to you and to everybody here. The work that you have done, are doing, and will do with Palestinians, especially Palestinian children, is the highest expression of brain spotting. It's the ultimate expression of brain spotting.
Nice to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's an honor for me to be able to use it. It's someone mentioned it. It's such a powerful tool, and it added to our confidence, especially that, again, culturally, a lot of the therapy that are available are not culturally sensitive, they don't work here. The one-on-one talking, the very individualistic, and I felt at one point that, because I'm Western educated, that it felt like everything I've learned was a bit of a lie, kind of.
You know what? The evidence-based models and the diagnosis-based models are highly Western.
Yeah.
And even in the Western context, they're not only not culturally attuned and culturally wise, they're not nervous system attuned and nervous system wise, and culture is in our nervous systems, it goes through every synaptic connection that we have.
Yeah, that's very nicely said. Yeah, exactly. Never thought of it that way, but it is.
Yeah.
And just one last comment very quickly, that we also have a Christian population in the Arab world, and in the Middle Eastern world. I know we've mentioned Muslim, and it is mainly, but also I don't want us to forget I'm Lebanese also, so there's a big Christian Lebanese, there's Palestinian Christians, so I don't want also to forget that part. But they are very culturally close to us, or to Muslims. So I just want to make sure that when we talk about the Middle East, we don't forget that part.
Right. There's a lot of wherever you go, whatever region of the world you go to, there's a lot of ethnic and religious minorities.
Yes, 100%.
No. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just say that I watched over the decades what happened in Lebanon, and I found it so tragic, and at some level so unnecessary. But I guess if it was unnecessary, truly unnecessary, it wouldn't have happened, even though it shouldn't have happened. But again, any healing that you bring to your own people is the highest form of respect and blessing that you can give to me.
Thank you. We'll keep you posted.
Please do. Please do. Thank you.
Thank you for providing us this tool. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ninad, and thank you, David. I wrote down two words I wouldn't forget. One was commenting on what you shared, Ninad, and then right at the end as well when you mentioned faith, and I was like, oh, I'll mention this as well. The two words, one was faith and the other one was fear, but I'll start with the faith one, which was what I mentioned earlier, like, this isn't important, but I think it is. And when Dr. Tala was talking about the attunement and how in this region culturally so many people are practicing their faiths, be it whichever faith it may be, not only does that it kind of strengthens the muscle of attunement when we are practicing prayer practices, communal prayer practices. I noticed, for example, even in Lebanon, I saw something popped up on my phone the other day where it's so common to do really large, in Catholicism in particular, processions in the villages where you just have like thousands of people walking together praying outside. But then in mosques, you have that daily where you have large numbers of people. In churches, you have it weekly, let's say, or you can also have it daily, but they're not really large numbers. And I find that here much more than back in Oz or in Western cultures with practicing faiths communally. And I think that has strengthened our muscle of attunement and connection. And then in terms of fear, with the question, not the question, but the statement you said, Nina, I think, how's this going to work? And then it worked. With Brainspotting, I find that there's a natural fear that many people have of re-traumatization whenever we're dealing with complex trauma. And it's going, oh, but if I create some activation, how are we going to have enough containment? And the premise of that fear is not having trust or faith in a person's nervous system and in it knowing what to do to heal itself, as long as we are grounded and attuned with them. And they're not going to flood when we're with them because we have that nervous system that's allowing that increased window of tolerance. So that fear of re-traumatization, if there's any activation, I think is more common than we think, and it's a cheeky gremlin. But I think in time also, as you said, David, when you keep seeing, and I call them miracles, these miracles happening in all of our sessions, and we go in with that certainty, this is going to work because the system knows what to do. It's really cool. Now I'm going to stop talking. Smita, thank you for your patience. Your hand has been up for so long. Thank you. Please unmute.
Thank you, David, for this session today. Thank you, Shanti. I have one observation, and my question is linked to my observation. So, David, I just wanted to tell you about my experience in the MENA region. I'm not from the MENA region. I've been living here for the last 13 years. And about the attunement bit, your question really triggered me in the most positive ways. And I began thinking about my experience here. And I was just trying to bring all that to a quick summation and not to take too much of your time, because I see I've got one more hand up here. Is my experience of Dubai is the right opposite of what people perceive Dubai to be, in the sense that Dubai is fast-paced, very modern. But if you will talk to people who are old timers here and have lived here for a long time, they'll tell you that people would talk to you over a meeting and they would just have a cup of tea with you and then just give you business. And there was no hustle around the whole process. And they would just not even talk business. They would not like you to talk business. They would just sit across and talk to you and get a sense of you. And it's very slow paced, or it was very slow paced in its original flavor, especially the people living here. And and that I felt was so linked to the attunement, the nervous system slowing down and all that. And the second bit, of course, was that we talk about attunement, and then and in Islamic concepts we have niya or niyat, which is roughly translating to intention. And amongst the women folk, especially, I feel over here that their ability to read that is very rarefied, it's very intense, it's very refined. And they'll just look at you, smile, and say, you have so much of, yeah, I like you, and sit with you. And there's some just natural attunement happening right there. And it's very effortless. You don't have to correct, there's no self correction there. I think it probably comes from the process of prayer, which is so fantastic. And when we talk about, how the containment bit, and from this observation, actually, David, comes my question, and I wanted to have a talk with Shanti too about this, that, we talk about containment and we're trying to refine the holding space, as Nusrat very nicely put it. And language and culture are so inexplicably linked together, right? All our paradigms about what we hold right or wrong are embedded in the way we format our language structures. And we can all speak in English, but we can speak it differently. And yes, we have the acknowledgement framework when we are receiving in the BSP training as to how we acknowledge, whatever we are receiving from the people who are going for it. But I really wanted to ask you this question today: that is there a way to use language more emphatically, where we reduce any unintended inferences or even sometimes innocent microaggressions around the receiving process, especially when the client wants to release and talk after this? What we say is has such power over the client at that time. Sorry, you want to say something because I could sense.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, you're attuned to my response.
Yeah.
Brain spotting is very language based. We talk about it a little bit in phase 2. Number one, we want to use clean language.
Yeah.
In other words, not language that has all kinds of inferences in it, but language that clearly and simply expresses the intention, okay, the thought. And the other part in this context is that every client speaks their own language. And it doesn't matter whether they speak one language or bilingual or beyond that. Even you're speaking in the same language, okay, when the words and phrases that the client uses and means have a different meaning than when you use the words and phrases.
Exactly.
So that we listen carefully to not only what the client says, but we listen to how they say it. And it's really important when you talk about what the client is talking about, that you don't change a phrase, you don't even change a single word, that you learn and you use their language.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's the best way to, and that's very validating and very, respectful.
Yeah.
But it's also very, very attuned.
Yeah.
Therapists speak in jargon, and they speak in their own language and all this stuff, and then we use it in our own ways. And there's a narcissistic quality to that it's like what the client said and means is not what we're saying and what we mean, and we have to, and so attuning to the language is also in a nuanced way attuning to the client's culture as well.
Yeah. That's exactly my point. So, and in that context, there's this concept of ikhlaq. I don't know if I'm using it right because I'm not very well versed with Arabic, but ikhlaq basically translates to good manners, but yes, and good character. But it's got a little more nuanced quality about it. It's a little more to do with your entire whole being self coming there in the most positive way possible, right? And if that could be a part of the program in the Arabic, in the MENA region, it would be so fantastic and so beautifully blended, I think. And just the last bit over here, I felt that this could also be very important for clients who have maybe faulty neuroceptive abilities or blunted neuroceptive abilities where they are reading the wrong cues. And at that time, you even saying a simple statement or fact can probably trigger their shame. And I've experienced this with the ladies I work, especially beyond 45, where they're so rooted in their culture and they're such guardians of their culture that you cannot say something without actually, triggering the whole shame process and having a
Right.
shutdown. If
Yeah.
at all you get a chance to say something when they are releasing anything, yeah.
They need to be received and respected exactly for who they are and how they are.
Exactly, exactly.
Thank you. Thanks. We just have like 2 minutes left, so if there's one last brief comment question, and then I can give a brief answer to it.
Yes, Saren, if you can unmute. Thank you for your patience so much, and really quickly, we're back in a minute.
It's quick. I do feel after having done Brainspotting for a whole year and done the intense and all the different levels, it is very neutral. It's how you present it to your clients, culturally and religiously. It is very neutral. And it comes back the cultural sensitivity from the clients themselves, their preference of their therapist being Muslim or Christian, to be able to relate to their own situation within their own community. And one of the main things that comes up a lot is the lack or the narrow number of native Arabic speaking therapists who are trained. And when I talk to therapists about brain spotting, you should try it, you should learn it, it's really got good, and I invite friends to try it, is they feel restricted because also the rollout is not in their native language. And that translation, instant translation, just kills the vibe of it, because they just do want to have that one-on-one. They want to keep that level of transference. So I just wanted to put this out there as a,
Yeah.
and
Well,
I don't know what you would say, but I just feel culturally and religiously, it's a very neutral. It's much easier presenting it than a lot of techniques, but it also comes from where the client's background is, like, gender preference, language preference, religion preference is what's defining the cultural sensitivity for brain spotting and other techniques, because of the whole therapist shopping phenomena clients have, needing
right.
to, going through the process until they find their right pair.
Well, hopefully, as we go ahead, brain spotting, the material will be translated into Arabic, and there will be trainings available in Arabic as well. So I definitely see the necessity for that, and that's part of our evolution of brain spotting in Middle East and North Africa. Anyhow, thank you. I just want to, the last thing I want to say as we finish is brain spotting is not meant to be done in any particular way. It's meant to be done in a very unique, individualized way, that each and every one of you should do brain spotting differently. Do it in a way that makes sense to you, feels right to you, that it's an outgrowth of yourself, but also that you're in a constant state of evolution with your brain spotting, that wherever you're at today is not where you should be tomorrow or next week or next year. And I will be back to be with and speak with our MENA community. But you'll see, every time I come back, I'm in a different place. So make brain spotting your own, but always be in your own state of evolution with it. Chantal, I want to thank you for making this happen. And and I sorry about that. That's my phone. I will be back. So I have to say goodbye now.
Thank you so much, David, for your time, your wisdom. It is so appreciated. And there have been many requests for you to come out here in person for a phase 3, 4, or 5 training, just putting it out there.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So
Okay.
appreciated. Thank
Bye
you,
bye.
everyone.
Good day.
See you.